Huh. Welp, looks like we're talking about this again. Oh joy. Hello everyone, my name's Aloubell, and Hollywood did the funny thing again where they took a beloved, recognizable character and made them look drastically different, thus causing another online culture war. I am of course talking about Astrid from the How to Train Your Dragon series. This is the Astrid we've all come to know and love. And this is live-action Astrid. It would, however, be unfair to only mention Astrid's character when the twins Roughnut and Toughnut got a similar treatment, not to mention Fishlegs, who is no longer blonde. From what we can tell, it really seems like the casting director really wanted to snuff out the blondes. Weird choice, but okay. If Gobber turns out to also not be blonde anymore, a discussion somewhere should probably be had, but let's move on. And before we get into it, special thanks to Filmora, Row994, and my other channel members, as well as others who donated over on Ko-fi for supporting me and my channel. If you want to support me as well and help keep this channel alive, you too can become a channel member by clicking join, donate on Ko-fi, or commission me for a chibi on Artistry. Links down below. Now, before I get into the issues and non-issues of these casting choices, let me start off by addressing some very weird comments about how the twins are no longer twinning because they no longer look alike. You guys do know that Roughnut and Toughnut are fraternal twins, right? The fact that one is a boy and one is a girl means that they were never biologically identical. They're fraternal twins that just so happen to look very similar. Fraternal twins share as much DNA as non-twin siblings, so it's entirely possible for them to not look alike. I mean, I agree with you that Rough and Tough should look the same, but that's only because we know them to look the same, and it's our expectation that they look the same. But for those whose only comment as to why the live-action casting is off for the twins is merely because twins in real life always have to look the same, that's not factually correct. Had Rough and Tough not had animated counterparts, and this was our introduction to them, it would honestly be fine. But because we have attachments to the original movie designs, it's not fine. And that brings us to our main issue. This isn't Astrid. These aren't the twins Roughnut and Toughnut. This isn't Fishlegs. Why? Because they don't look like themselves. I honestly couldn't care less what someone's race or ethnicity is when it comes to playing characters. My only thing is that I want the actors to physically resemble the characters they are playing. You know, when it comes to adapting characters who already have a pre-established look to them. Nico Parker is partially black, but her complexion and facial structure actually resembles Astrid pretty well. She could decently pass as Astrid. Had they made her blonde, I don't think there would be as big of an outcry. Nico was a fine enough choice, looks-wise. Could they have cast someone who better resembles Astrid? Yes. Should they have? Ideally. But judging by some of these screenshots, she's passable. Honestly, the hair color they chose to have Nico go with was the biggest oopsie. It's one of the big oopsies for the other characters as well as other physical differences from the animated characters.
But Aloe, why should it matter? After all, it's not like the animated movies are going anywhere. Those original designs still exist. This is just a different interpretation of the story, so some changes are expected.
Well, except one, the interpretation isn't really different. It's just the medium that changed. From the trailer, it seems like the live-action movie is seemingly almost like a shot-for-shot recreation of the animation, in which case I can't help but ask what's even the point of the live-action movie when we have plenty of books in existence that have never been adapted in any visual medium, and yet we're wasting money on a story that's already had its time to shine rather recently. And two, It's very peculiar and fascinating the things they decided to keep the same versus the things they wanted to change. Hiccup and Toothless are basically identical to their animated counterparts. If we want the live-action movie to have its own identity and not be compared to the animated movies, then why not change Toothless's design? Why not change Hiccup? In fact, we could have gone an interesting route here and adapted the book series a bit more faithfully, which would have definitely given us different character designs. Why not do any of that? Why? Because recognizability. They want us to recognize Hiccup and Toothless. Toothless especially, since he's lovable and adorable, marketable, and has captured the hearts of so many people. Does his original animated design just with a bit more of an HD filter in a real-world setting look a little awkward? Yeah, a little. At least to me. Should they have made him look a bit more realistic? Probably. And yes, I know that dragons aren't real, but you know what I mean. We have cartoony dragons and we have non-cartoony dragons. Don't give me a hard time. But they would never change Toothless's design because they know that people would be ready to go to war about it. Which makes you realize that they'd have to know on some level the backlash they'd receive on the casting for the other characters. They knew, but they did it anyway. Bold or stupid? You decide. But anyway, I know I'd probably be upset if Toothless's design changed. I love my black cat dragon. I want one. But that's exactly my point. Toothless and Hiccup are both recognizable because their looks are part of their identity. Take away any discourse on race and gender swapping. Ignore the political aspect of it for just a second. Simply put, we are used to characters looking a certain way, and we have grown attached to the way they look. Traditionally, if you change something regarding anything that people have an attachment to, they will often be upset. Some people can adapt to change better than others, but many can't. That's why a lot of people are upset about the changes in this live-action movie. We've known these characters from all the way back in 2010. 3 movies, 5 specials, and 2 TV series of getting to know these characters. Even when the characters get older and some of their physical features change, they still look like themselves. We are attached to characters and how they look. If Sonic ever got a new series and he was green the entire time, people would be upset. If Stitch's new design was yellow, people would be upset. If Bruce Wayne was ever blonde, people would be upset. If you mess with any character's design that has a constant aspect about them and people have been attached to that character for years, don't be surprised that they're upset.
But Aloe, they're fictional characters. Who cares if they look different? As long as the characters' personalities and goals and general vibe stays the same, then it shouldn't matter.
Except it does though, because as much as some people don't want to admit it, looks are important to one's identity and how one is perceived. If something fundamental changed about the way you look, people wouldn't recognize you. If I suddenly turned into a white or Asian person, no one would recognize me. Me having brown skin and dark brown eyes is part of how people know it's me. If we go back to Stitch for a second, if we change Stitch to yellow, or white, or brown, or whatever, would he still be Stitch?
Of course he would be. After all, Stitch isn't what he looks like on the outside. It's his personality, his quirks, his likes and dislikes, his goals, his mannerisms, his character arc, how he reacts in certain situations, and his memories. If everything else stays the same and he matches the vibes of original Stitch, why does it matter what color he is?
Because it does. You can't just change a fundamental aspect about how someone looks and still say it's the same thing. If you rebooted the Lilo and Stitch series and Stitch is now a duck and everything else is the same, I promise you that people will be upset. Stitch is not a duck, even if they made him an alien duck. He's not a duck.
But Aloe, in this hypothetical scenario, this new colored or new species Stitch can be for the new generation. You and the original enjoyers of blue koala dog alien Stitch can still like the OG Stitch. He isn't getting erased.
I guess that's technically true, but the reality of the situation is that people are going to get mad anyway because you're messing with a beloved character and people don't like that. Besides, if Stitch can be any creature of any color, then what is Stitch? Who is Stitch? How do you define Stitch? When people tell others about Stitch, they usually include a description of his looks along with his personality and quirks. Unless we're talking about a shapeshifter, you should be able to pick out Stitch, or any character for that matter, from a crowd. We as people and even fictional characters aren't just walking disembodied souls with personalities. Our looks are part of who we are and part of what define us, even if we don't put emphasis on it, because I know I don't, at least not when it comes to my race. It is still part of how people perceive us. It's how we are recognized. But when I see this screenshot, I don't see Astrid. I see some girl. When I look here, I don't see the twins. I see some random people. I don't recognize them. Many people don't recognize them. And that's the problem. Familiarity is cozy, but when these super familiar characters are no longer familiar, it's uncomfortable and upsetting. Now, I'm not saying if these negative feelings are right or wrong. It's just a natural reaction to change. Even in real life, if your physical appearance changed, like due to some intentional cosmetic changes or an unfortunate accident happening, there would be a transitionary period for people to get used to, or not get used to how you look. And in some cases, people can be upset with the changes. But in these cases, you are still you, and more likely than not, there's probably multiple physical factors that still signal to others that you are who you are. And even if there somehow wasn't a single ounce of visual recognizability, you at least have a reasonable justification for why you look different. If Stitch, for example, had a whole new series and he was yellow, or a duck, with no explanation, it would be upsetting. But if in canon he, say, fell into a tub of permanent yellow paint, or if he was zapped with a ray that turned him permanently into a duck, it would admittedly still be upsetting, but at least there's a reason for it. But like I said, make no mistake, people would still not be happy with this creative decision. Of course, not all changes are unreasonable, and not all changes need justification. Unfortunately, what counts as reasonable and justifiable differs from person to person. For example, in Astrid's case, she's sporting pigtails in the live-action movie, whereas in the animation, she never did. I personally don't find this particular detail to be all that integral, but others might. Certainly, there are some characters that if their hairstyle changed, I'd have an issue, such as with Usagi Tsukino / Sailor Moon. Everyone's tolerance to different types of changes differs, but the bigger, more obvious changes will most likely gain the most amount of disdain, especially when there is no in-universe reason for the change, such as in the case in the live-action How to Train Your Dragon movie. I might have some guesses as to why the changes were made on a meta level, but the new versions of Astrid, Fishlegs, Ruffnut, and Tuffnut are very obviously inexplicably different for no good in-universe reason.
But Aloe, I'm still curious about something. What about the characters in media who have looks that change dramatically all the time, like comic book characters? People don't have as big of an issue with their designs changing, or book characters that don't really have a look to them since it's all written out and not seen.
Well, I can almost guarantee you that despite general comic book fans being used to character designs changing, just look at how different Lois Lane has looked over the years, I'm sure that there are folks out there who do have strong opinions about this and don't like it when their favorite character has a design change. Like I said before, people grow used to how a character looks and get attached to certain designs. Having said that, however, I think we live in a society that is conditioned to expect comic book characters, or even legacy characters that are not part of comics, to change their designs every so often. And by legacy characters, I think of something like some of the My Little Pony characters that have existed through generations, like Applejack or Pinkie Pie, who have definitely changed in design over the years. And let's not forget how Rainbow Dash used to have Rarity's personality in other generations. Some MLP fan of those older generations might not have liked the changes in newer ones, But at the same time, it's expected for characters like this to change and look different, so the shock isn't as drastic compared to stories where frequent changes aren't common. Like in the How to Train Your Dragon movies, where the characters have only ever looked a certain way for the last almost 15 years. But even then, if a comic book character's design goes too far out of left field, there probably would be an outcry. After all, in most cases, characters still tend to pretty much look like themselves, even throughout different iterations and art styles. And if I were a betting person, I'd bet that whenever characters do have too drastic of a change, many fans don't like it. That's only natural. As for book characters, since we only ever get written descriptions of what they look like, everyone has a somewhat different expectation of what these characters should look like. But in a similar sense to the phenomenon where animated characters are translated into live action and people get upset if there's an unexpected change in their character design, people also get upset if the character from a book being represented in a movie or show either doesn't look like the image they've grown attached to in their minds, or they get upset if the actor doesn't match the description written in the book. So ultimately, no matter how you slice it, no matter the circumstance, whether it be a comic or legacy character having their 99th design change, a character from a book being adapted into a visual medium, or an animated character being adapted into live action, or vice versa, if you mess with the character design that someone has grown attached to, they will be upset. There will be an outcry. Sure, many people will accept the changes and get used to these new designs, but many won't. It's fine. And it's understandable. Just don't bully the actors of the live-action series. Actually, don't bully anyone. Don't be mean just because you don't like something. You don't have to like it, and it's understandable why you don't like it. But some people do. Let them have their fun. For the most part, I don't agree with the live-action remakes either. Well, not for the movies that don't need them. And I especially don't agree with making characters not look like themselves. But enough people don't mind these changes that they'll unfortunately keep making decisions like this. You can't tell people not to like something. If they like it, and it's hard to change people's opinions once they're locked in. But for the people who do like these changes, don't be confused as to why the rest of us have problems with it. There can be a few reasons why, but you can at least understand that we don't like the characters we love to look different than what we're used to. It's not always about politics. Change can simply be hard. I'm sure there is a character you are attached to and would be upset if their looks changed dramatically. Please show some empathy. And once again, I'm not ignorant. I'm aware of the other more socially/politically charged reasons that people may be upset, but I'm choosing to speak from the more neutral perspective of the simple fact that people don't like when something they care about is messed with in unnecessary ways. The goal of this video was to help provide at least one simple, relatable reason as to why this backlash is even occurring. It may not be the big reason, but it is a reason. But what do you guys think? How do you feel when such character design changes happen, or when an actor is cast as a character they don't resemble? Should we only hire actors who are really good for the part? Or ones who both look like the character and are good for the part? Comment below with your thoughts and the dragon emoji, and let's get this conversation started. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. But as for now, that's all there is. There isn't any more.